There's a trust problem in our society and it affects every single one of us every day. The data tells us that this trust problem is only getting worse. Many years ago, I had a startup business, an internet business, and we had spent a good year getting to the point where we were ready to launch. And I engaged a company, a telemarketing company, to come in and to run the telemarketing campaign to launch the business. So much was hinging on what the telemarketing company did and how well they performed. We built all of the systems for them to go out, to call the database that we provided, to make the calls, to make the sales. It was a massive amount of effort that had gone in the background. All they had to do was have the people on the phone ringing up. We had the quotation, we'd agreed, we'd signed, we'd even paid them for the services beforehand. That's what they required as a part of the deal. At that point, I happened to be traveling and I was in Chicago, still living in Perth. I was in Chicago on the other side of the planet. And I was eagerly waiting on news for this first day's data from the telemarketers to come through. And so I rang the owner of the telemarketing company, desperate to get this information. And I spoke to him. I finally got through to him and I spoke to him and I said, "So tell me, how's the data going?" And he said, "Well, we haven't started today." And I was like, "You haven't started? Okay." So then we put it back and then it was put back and it took him weeks and weeks. Despite the fact we had months of negotiations and commitment, it took him weeks and weeks to get to the point where he started to do the campaign that we'd already agreed on, that we'd signed on, that I'd paid for. He breached the trust that we put in him, and it had a massive effect on us. Ultimately, even when he did get going, he couldn't deliver on what he'd promised. But that's one form of trust being breached. Let's look at another. 3 weeks ago, a company called Equifax, one of the largest data collection providers in the US. So they basically determine the creditworthiness of companies in the States. Well, they had a data breach themselves, and 143 million people's data, private data, like social security number that everyone is told protected at all costs, date of birth, address, you name it. All of their data was leaked and available for anyone. This is like 50% of the US population completely breached. This is on the back of 4 weeks ago, a week earlier, the online spam bot dump with 711 million people. Both these examples where my business, the person didn't deliver trust, and these recent online hacks where millions of people's data has been exposed. Both these are a failure of trust. But what is trust? Let's take a look at what trust really means. Trust is both an emotional and a logical act. Emotionally, when you expose your vulnerability to a person, you trust that person with that openness that they won't expose your vulnerability. Logically, it's where you have assessed the probability of gain and loss, and it's where you've determined that the person will behave in a predictable manner. There are 4 dimensions to trust. The first is predictability. So that is being able to predict what the people around you are going to do and how they're going to act. And this creates a safe environment both now and into the future. The second is value exchange. So that is understanding that I am going to give something and get something in return. So I'll give you 2 sheep for your 1 cow. Trust means making an exchange with someone when you do not have full knowledge about them or their intent. Third is delayed reciprocity. Trust means giving something now with the understanding that it may be paid in some unspecified way at some unspecified time. Fourth is exposed vulnerabilities. Trust is exposing your vulnerabilities to other people, but expecting that other people will not take advantage of those vulnerabilities. So these are the 4 dimensions of trust. The problem is that people within institutions build systems which they expect people to rely on, but they don't meet these 4 dimensions of trust. Then they expect people to trust these systems and wonder why people have a lower level of trust with their institution, be it a company or a government or NGO or whoever it is. They remove people from the system and expect people to just rely on and trust the system. But the system doesn't have any trust. We can't trust the system. We can only trust people. Let's look at Facebook. Arguably one of the largest and most influential companies ever to exist. Facebook have arguably influenced elections and overthrown governments, and they rely completely on their algorithm, the system. Let's take a look at the Facebook company motto. Move fast and break things. They want you to trust their system implicitly, and yet they have a motto which is move fast and break things. That doesn't make sense. Facebook even sent me a survey saying how much do I trust Facebook? I don't trust Facebook at all. I don't think that Facebook or any of their system exhibits any of the 4 dimensions of trust. Have you ever read the terms and conditions of an internet company? This is the dirty little secret of the software industry. You subscribe to a service, no one ever reads the contract that you're agreeing to, and all of the contract is completely one way toward the company. They offer no care and no responsibility, and if they happen to lose all of your data or anything else happens that has a massive impact on you, they're just putting their hands up in the air saying, well, our terms and conditions, it's the dirty little secret. And they wonder why we don't trust them. They trust their system completely and yet offer no accountability when their system fails. And these systems fail all the time. Until such time as we can solve the key problem within the foundations of the internet, which is anonymity, people being able to be on the internet and not knowing who they are, we're not going to be able to build a trusted internet. Anonymity is at the heart of so many problems because we don't know who we're dealing with. We don't know who is doing what. If we knew every single person who was on the internet and we could identify who they are, trust on the internet would increase massively. But that's perhaps for another time. Let's now take a look at some data around trust and what it means in the context of business and government. In the 2017 Edelman Trust Survey, 53% of people believe the system is failing and a further 32% are uncertain. In terms of people's trust in business, the global average is 52%. For CEO credibility, the global average is 52%, but in Australia, it is 26%, down 1/3 in the past 12 months. That means that 74% of Australian people don't believe that Australian CEOs are credible. If CEOs are not credible, then who is? employees. Across 6 key questions, employees rank the highest to deliver credible and honest information. Finally, when hearing information about a company, the most credible spokesperson would be a person like yourself, which is almost double a CEO or board of directors. If we take this to the other extreme, in Western Australia, we had a premier for about 8 years by the name of Sir Charles Court. And a famous local story about Charles Court is that he always put his telephone number in the telephone directory. So anybody could ring him up at his house at any time. Now, obviously, this was in the 70s. It was well before mobile phones. But if you had a problem, you could ring the Premier's house. Now, that wouldn't happen today. But how much trust did that build? How much did his constituents feel like they were represented by him? And if they had a problem, they could just talk to him. There's a saying from the US, no taxation without representation. Well, I put it to you, certainly the people in Charlie Court's area felt like they were represented and they could talk to him about any problem that they had. So how does all of this impact you, and what does all of this data and trust mean for you? How does this impact small business? Well, there's an idea that gets around that you can buy a laptop and you can sit on the beach and run an internet business and live the life of your dreams. Well, I put it to you that that's all garbage. People want to deal with people. People don't want to deal with a system that you or anybody else built. People want to have an interaction with another person that they trust. Don't think building a system is the answer, because ultimately, if the whole world is going that way and people need to have a trusted relationship, how do you think that's going to work out? What is the opportunity that comes from this data and where society is heading? The problem is that people in institutions build systems that they want to interact with customers and they try to remove people from the picture. Therefore, there is no opportunity to have these 4 dimensions of trust occur, and then they wonder why people don't trust the institution. Let me explain. Once upon a time, people had to engage with each other to survive. And I needed a cow and you needed 2 sheep, we would exchange. So the 4 dimensions of trust were able to easily build, and I knew that if we were engaging that you weren't going to kill me and you weren't going to steal my produce, that we could build trust over time. And this worked really, really well in that environment. And then what happened is people decided to put systems in between people and customers. People thought, we can be more efficient, we can be more effective, we can serve more customers, we can make more profit. Whatever it is, it could be a government or an NGO or a business. People in these organisations began to put systems between customers and the people. So there was no possibility to build out these 4 dimensions of trust. At every opportunity, the system was proving that I don't trust this organisation. My first point of contact is a website or a call centre based in a 3rd world country where people don't speak the language and they don't have any decision-making power. When people can only interact with your system, they can't build trust with you. And business is just about people doing stuff, people coming together to interact. If all I can interact with is your system, it's not going to work. So what you've got to do, the opportunity is to not have customers interact with your system, but to have customers build trusted relationships with people using these 4 dimensions of trust. So that rather than the system being in between your people or your organisation and the customer, it's supporting them. Don't have every interaction with customers be all about the system. Like, talk to real, genuine, authentic people. Train them on the 4 dimensions of trust and get them to build that trust out. This is what is hardwired into our DNA. Dealing with another person, trusting another person. We can't change our DNA. If this is what you're trying to achieve, how can you possibly be thinking that it's a surprise when trust is lowered? If you're going to build a system to build a more efficient and effective company, make sure that it's supporting your people and it's not standing in the way of a trusted relationship between people, customers and your people. In this world of clickbait and fake news and marketing excess, people want to deal with authentic and genuine people that they can trust. So the opportunity is to build a system that supports your people to have authentic, meaningful, trusted relationships with customers, and don't build a system to interact with your customers.